The Galactic University, a sprawling complex of shimmering glass spires and hovering platforms, was the crown jewel of interstellar education. Here, the brightest minds from hundreds of star systems gathered, learning everything from quantum engineering to ancient galactic history. Among the bustling crowds of alien students, each species displaying its unique quirks, like the aquatic Marylands floating in their portable tanks or the towering Erzani whose scales shimmered like molten gold, one species was conspicuously absent. Humans. Kale, a young Zilorian with translucent skin and eyes that reflected constellations, stood by a massive holographic display in the common hall. His bioluminescent fingers danced over his data pad as he scrolled through the class schedules. Around him, a group of his friends, each as diverse as the stars, chattered animatedly. But today, their conversation wasn't about their coursework or the latest holosport championship. It was about the most controversial and intriguing topic at the university: humans. "Did you hear?" Nara, a feathery-winged Lytheran, said, her voice tinged with excitement. "They're introducing a new course on Earth wars. Finally, some real history instead of the Galactic Council's sanitized nonsense." Kale raised an eyebrow. "Earth wars? Isn't that taboo? I thought humans were banned from practically everything in the galaxy, including these halls." "They are," replied Rillick, a reptilian Zenthian who always seemed to know everything. His scales glistened as he leaned in conspiratorially. "That's why it's so fascinating. Nobody ever talks about them. It's like the Council wants to erase their existence. But I overheard Professor Kaltris say the course is going to reveal why humans were barred from joining the Galactic Council altogether." The group fell silent for a moment, the weight of Rillick's words settling over them. "I don't get it," Nara finally said. "Humans are so plain. They're short-lived, not particularly strong, and they don't have any special abilities. Why would the Council even care about them?" Kale shrugged, but his curiosity was piqued. "There's only one way to find out," he said, a flicker of determination in his voice. "We're signing up for that course." The next day, the lecture hall was packed with students. Hushed whispers filled the air as Professor Kaltris, a stern-looking Rhizorian with silvery tendrils that shifted like smoke, took the podium. A massive hologram flickered to life behind him, displaying Earth, blue and green, vibrant and alive, spinning slowly in the void of space. "Today," Kaltris began, his voice resonant and measured, "we embark on a journey to uncover one of the greatest mysteries of our time: why humans, despite their unremarkable appearance and limited lifespan, were deemed too dangerous to participate in galactic affairs." The room fell deathly quiet. Even the notoriously restless students from the hyperactive Spherian species sat still, their glowing antennae quivering with anticipation. "The answer," Kaltris continued, "lies not in their biology, but in their history. Specifically, their wars." With a wave of his hand, the hologram shifted to scenes of Earth's past, vast armies clashing in ancient battlefields, the devastation of nuclear explosions, the chaos of intercontinental conflicts. The images were both mesmerizing and horrifying, a brutal testament to humanity's capacity for destruction. "Humans," Kaltris said, his voice heavy with gravitas, "have waged war not just for survival, but for ideology, for resources, for revenge, and sometimes simply because they could. They have developed strategies and weapons that defy logic, pushing the boundaries of destruction to levels unimaginable to most species. And yet, despite all this, they have also demonstrated an unparalleled resilience and ingenuity. It is this combination that makes them uniquely dangerous." Kale leaned forward in his seat, his mind racing. He had always thought of humans as a minor footnote in galactic history, a species that had burned too brightly and too briefly. But this was something else entirely. As the lecture continued, Kaltris delved deeper into humanity's history, recounting tales of leaders who had turned the tide of impossible wars, soldiers who had sacrificed everything for their comrades, and inventors who had created weapons that could obliterate entire civilizations. Yet, interwoven with these stories were moments of extraordinary courage, compassion, and innovation. By the time the lecture ended, Kale's head was spinning. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than Caltrus was letting on. Later that evening, as Cale and his friends gathered in their usual spot, a secluded alcove overlooking the shimmering nebulae beyond the university, he voiced his thoughts. "I don't buy it," he said, pacing back and forth. "There's something missing. Caltrus painted humans as monsters, but there's clearly more to them than that. Why would the Galactic Council fear them so much? There has to be a reason they're banned from war." Rillick nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe it's not just their capacity for destruction. Maybe it's their unpredictability. Their creativity. Or their stubbornness," Nara added. "Did you see how they kept fighting, even when the odds were against them? That's not normal." Cale stopped pacing and turned to face his friends. "There's only one way to find out," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "We have to dig deeper. There's got to be more records hidden away somewhere. If the Council won't tell us the truth, we'll find it ourselves." As the group exchanged determined glances, a faint chill ran through the air, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. They had no idea what they were about to uncover, but one thing was certain: their journey had only just begun. The data archives of the Galactic University were a fortress of knowledge, a labyrinth of encrypted files and ancient recordings buried deep within layers of security. Only authorized researchers and council-approved historians were permitted access to the restricted sections, where secrets of the galaxy's past lay hidden. Yet for Cale and his friends, the lure of the unknown was irresistible. Late one evening, the group gathered in a secluded corner of the university's sprawling library. Nara perched on the edge of a floating bookshelf, her feathers shimmering faintly in the dim light. Rillick's scales glistened with a soft luminescence as he hunched over his datapad, bypassing yet another layer of security protocols. Cale stood watch, his translucent skin faintly glowing with nerves as he scanned the area for patrolling drones. "Are you sure about this?" Nara whispered, her wings fluttering anxiously. "If we're caught, it's not just expulsion. They'll wipe our memories of this entire project. Then we'll just have to make sure we're not caught," Cale replied, his voice steady but his fingers twitching at his sides. Rillick's reptilian eyes narrowed as he completed the final bypass. "We're in," he hissed triumphantly. The holographic interface in front of him lit up, displaying a dizzying array of files. "Earth, Class 7 prohibited species," he muttered, scrolling through the index. "Here we go." The group leaned in as the screen filled with data. Ancient records of Earth's wars, council memos debating humanity's exclusion, and most intriguingly, a classified report labeled Directive 12-7A, Containment Protocol. "Directive 12-7A?" Cale murmured. "What's that?" Rillick tapped the file, and the hologram shifted to reveal a grainy video recording. A figure, cloaked in the robes of a high-ranking council official, stood before a tribunal of shadowy silhouettes. The timestamp indicated the recording was over a century old. "Humans," the official began, their voice echoing through the library's silent air, "are unlike any species we have encountered. Their adaptability is unparalleled. Their ability to innovate under pressure is both their greatest strength and their most terrifying trait. But it is their psychology that poses the greatest threat. They possess an innate capacity for defiance, for pushing beyond limits that would break most beings. This, combined with their penchant for war, makes them incompatible with galactic peace." The screen flickered, and new images appeared. Battlefields littered with the ruins of alien war machines, human soldiers fighting with a ferocity that bordered on madness, and most disturbingly, scenes of humans turning enemy technology against its creators with devastating precision. "They don't just fight wars," the official continued. "They evolve through them. Every conflict makes them stronger, smarter, more unpredictable. If allowed into our ranks, they would disrupt the balance of power. Worse, if provoked, they could become a threat to the galaxy itself. The Council's decision is clear. Humans must be excluded from all military engagements and closely monitored to ensure they do not pose a danger to interstellar stability." The recording ended, leaving the group in stunned silence. "Unbelievable," Nara whispered, her feathers bristling. "They're not banned because they're weak. They're banned because the Council is afraid of them. Afraid of what they can become. Rillick added, his voice low. It's not just their wars. It's their refusal to stop. Their persistence. Cale's mind raced as he tried to process what they had just seen. The Council's decision made sense, in a way. Humanity's relentless drive, their ability to turn every setback into an advantage, it was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. But there was something else, something unspoken in the recording. The way the official had spoken, the urgency in their tone, it felt personal. That can't be all, Cale said, breaking the silence. There's more to this. Why would the Council go to such lengths to bury this? What aren't they telling us? Rillick frowned, his claws tapping against the datapad. There are more files, but they're encrypted. I can try to crack them, but it'll take time. Do it, Cale said firmly. We've come this far. We can't stop now. For the next several days, the group worked in secret, sifting through the data they had uncovered. Each new piece of information painted a clearer picture of humanity's complex nature. They read about the First Contact War, where a small human fleet had held off a vastly superior alien armada using nothing but cunning and desperation. They learned about the Soul Accord, a failed attempt to integrate Earth into the Galactic Council that had ended in disaster when human diplomats refused to back down from their demands. But it wasn't until Rillick finally decrypted the last file that the true scope of the Council's fears became clear. The file contained a series of classified communications between high-ranking Council members. The messages were fragmented, but one phrase stood out, repeated over and over like a mantra, asterisk. The spark must be contained. Asterisk. What's the spark? Nara asked, her voice tinged with unease. Rillick shook his head. I don't know. There's no explanation. Just these warnings about its potential to ignite something. Cale stared at the screen, his mind racing. The spark. Whatever it was the key to everything, the bans, the secrecy, the Council's fear. We need to find out what this means, he said, his voice steady despite the storm of questions swirling in his head. How? Nara asked. We're already risking everything just being here. If we dig any deeper, the Council will come after us. Then we'll have to be careful, Cale replied. But we can't stop now. Not when we're this close to the truth. As the group exchanged determined glances, a faint unease settled over them. They had no idea what the spark was, but one thing was certain. It was far more than they had bargained for. And if they continued down this path, they might uncover a truth that could change the galaxy forever. The air felt heavier now. Even the shimmering halls of the Galactic University, so familiar and comforting, seemed to bristle with an unseen tension. Cale and his friends were walking a razor's edge. Every encrypted file they uncovered, every forbidden record they accessed, deepened the mystery and the danger. The spark. It was everywhere in the Council's classified files, a ghostly phrase haunting every discussion about humanity's exclusion. But what was it? Cale had spent sleepless nights sifting through everything they had found so far. The spark wasn't just a metaphor. It was something real, something the Council feared deeply. But why? And why was it tied to humanity? These questions consumed him, driving him to the brink of obsession. Cale. Nara's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood in the doorway of their study alcove, her feathers dimmed with exhaustion. We've got something. Cale followed her to their makeshift command center, where Rillick was hunched over a flickering hologram. The reptilian's eyes gleamed with intensity. This is it, he said, his voice low and urgent. I found a reference to the spark in an archive of the First Contact War. It's buried deep, but it's there. A weapon. Or maybe not a weapon exactly. More like an event. Rillick gestured to the screen, which displayed a fragment of an old transmission log. Asterisk. Unleash the spark. Entire fleet neutralized. No survivors. Protocol 12 enacted. Humanity must be contained. Asterisk. Cale leaned closer, his breath catching. Neutralized? What does that mean? Destroyed? Not destroyed, Rillick said, shaking his head. Neutralized. That's the word they keep using. Whatever the spark is, it didn't just kill the fleet. It rendered them inert. Like they couldn't fight anymore. That doesn't make sense, Nara said, her wings twitching anxiously. How could something stop an entire fleet without destroying them? That's not how wars work. Kale's mind raced. The Council's fear of humanity wasn't just about their weapons or strategies. It was about this. The spark. Something so unprecedented, so terrifying, that it had forced the most powerful beings in the galaxy to isolate Earth entirely. We need more, Kale said. If this is connected to the First Contact War, there have to be survivors. Eyewitness accounts. Something. Already on it, Rillick said, his claws tapping rapidly on his datapad. There's a restricted database of testimonies from the war. If we can get in. The room's lights dimmed suddenly, and a piercing alarm blared through the air. The holographic interface in front of Rillick vanished, replaced by a red warning symbol. Unauthorized access detected. An automated voice droned. Security protocols initiated. Get out! Kale shouted, his heart pounding. The group scattered, grabbing their datapads and shutting down their devices as security drones swarmed the corridor outside. Kale's pulse raced as they sprinted through the winding halls of the university, dodging patrolling sentries and evading detection. Finally, they ducked into a maintenance tunnel, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Kale glanced at his friends, Nara trembling slightly, Rillick clutching his datapad like a lifeline. This is bigger than we thought, Kale said, his voice low. They're not just protecting history. They're protecting something that could change everything. We're not going to stop, are we? Nara asked, though she already knew the answer. Kale shook his head. We can't. The group spent the next few days in hiding, piecing together what little they had managed to download before the security breach. Rillick's datapad contained fragments of testimony from the First Contact War, words from survivors, cryptic and disjointed, but all pointing to the same event. Asterisk. The spark, not a weapon. A force. Something we couldn't comprehend. Asterisk. Asterisk. It wasn't fire or destruction. It was humanity itself. Asterisk. Asterisk. They didn't kill us. They made us see. And we couldn't fight after that. Asterisk. Kale's hands trembled as he read the final fragment. Asterisk. The spark isn't what humans do. It's what they are. That's why they have to be contained. Asterisk. The words echoed in his mind, their implications both terrifying and exhilarating. The spark wasn't a weapon or a technology. It was something intrinsic to humanity, something that defied the very nature of war. We need to see it for ourselves, Kale said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. See what? Rillick asked. The spark? How? The Council locked down Earth for a reason. Nobody gets in or out. Kale met his friend's gaze, determination blazing in his constellation-filled eyes. We'll find a way. Their chance came sooner than expected. The Council, alerted by the security breach at the university, had begun monitoring their every move. It was only a matter of time before they were caught. But instead of retreating, Kale and his friends decided to take a risk. In the dead of night, they hijacked a transport ship bound for the Sol system. The journey was fraught with danger, patrolling Council ships, malfunctioning navigation systems, and the ever-present threat of discovery. But Kale's resolve never wavered. As they approached Earth, the planet loomed large before them, its blue oceans and green continents glowing like a beacon in the void. For all its beauty, it felt ominous, as if the very air around it vibrated with untold secrets. Are we really doing this? Nara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kale nodded. We have to. The spark is the key to everything, the bans, the Council's fear, even our own questions. If we don't understand it, we'll never know the truth. The ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, skimming over vast oceans and sprawling cities that had long been abandoned by the galactic community. Kale felt a strange sense of unease as they approached the surface. And then they saw it, a massive crater, its edges glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. This, Cale realized, was Ground Zero, the place where the spark had been unleashed. The group landed on the edge of the crater, their ship's lights casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. As they stepped onto the surface, a strange sensation washed over them, an overwhelming mix of awe, fear, and something they couldn't quite name. "This is it," Cale whispered, his voice trembling. "This is where it happened." As they ventured deeper into the crater, the air grew thick with an unexplainable energy. Cale's heart raced as the weight of the moment settled over him. Whatever the spark was, they were about to face it head-on. The crater seemed alive. Energy pulsed through the air, unseen yet palpable, like the hum of a vast, invisible engine. Cale and his friends stood on its edge, their breaths caught between awe and terror. The faint glow from the crater floor illuminated shapes that defied understanding, shifting patterns that seemed to ripple through space itself. "This doesn't feel like anything I've seen before," Rillick murmured, his reptilian voice trembling. "It's not just energy. It's something more. Do you feel that?" Nara whispered, her wings drawn tight against her body. "It's like it's inside my head. Like it's speaking, but without words." Cale nodded, his gaze fixed on the glowing center of the crater. He felt it too, a presence, vast and unrelenting, yet strangely familiar. It wasn't hostile. If anything, it felt like an invitation. "We have to keep going," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging within him. The group descended cautiously into the crater, each step bringing them closer to the phenomenon that had haunted their every discovery. As they approached the glowing center, the air around them grew heavier, filled with an intangible pressure that seemed to press against their very souls. When they finally reached the center, they saw it, a column of light, brilliant and unyielding, rising from the ground and stretching into the sky. It pulsed in a rhythm that felt alive, each wave of light washing over them with an intensity that defied description. Cale stepped forward, his heart pounding. As he drew closer to the light, he felt something shift within him, a sudden clarity, as though a veil had been lifted from his mind. Images and emotions flooded his senses, triumph and despair, creation and destruction, the indomitable will of a species that refused to be broken. "It's them," Cale whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's humanity. Their essence, their resilience, their refusal to surrender." Nara and Rillick joined him, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. "This is the spark?" Rillick asked, his voice trembling. Cale nodded. "Not a weapon. Not a force. It's who they are. Their ability to adapt, to endure, to find meaning even in the face of annihilation. This is what the Council fears." As the realization sank in, the light shifted, its pulsing rhythm growing more intense. Cale felt a surge of energy course through him, filling him with a strength he had never known. It wasn't just physical, it was a deep, unshakable belief in the power of life itself. The spark wasn't just about humans. It was a mirror, reflecting the potential of all life. But humanity, in their unrelenting defiance, had become its truest expression. "We need to leave," Nara said suddenly, her voice urgent. "The Council knows we're here. They'll come for us." "No," Cale said, his voice firm. "They don't want to destroy this. They can't. That's why they buried it. They're afraid of what it could mean, of what it could inspire." Rillick frowned. "But what do we do with this? If we bring this back to the galaxy, it could spark chaos. Or hope," Cale said. "The galaxy needs to understand what humans represent. Not a threat, but a challenge, a reminder of what we're all capable of if we dare to evolve." Their discussion was cut short by the distant sound of engines. Cale turned to see a fleet of Council ships descending toward the crater, their lights cutting through the night. "They're here," Nara said, panic rising in her voice. Cale took a deep breath, his mind racing. They couldn't let the Council take this from them. Not now, not when they were so close to understanding. "We have to protect it," he said, his voice resolute. "Protect it how?" Rillick asked. Cale turned to the column of light, his heart pounding. He didn't have a plan, only a feeling, a deep, unshakable belief that the spark itself would guide them. Without hesitation, he stepped into the light. The moment he touched it, the world seemed to shatter around him. Colors and shapes blurred into a kaleidoscope of sensations, and Cale felt himself dissolve into something greater. He wasn't just Cale anymore. He was everything, every thought, every memory, every triumph and failure that humanity had ever known. And then, just as suddenly, he was back. The light had receded, and Cale stood at the center of the crater, glowing faintly with the same energy as the spark. His friends stared at him in shock. "Cale?" Nara asked hesitantly. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I understand now. The spark isn't just theirs. It's ours too. And it's time the galaxy remembered that." The council ships landed, their troops fanning out in a show of force. A high-ranking official stepped forward, their expression unreadable. "You've violated every law of the Galactic Council," the official said coldly. "Surrender, or face the consequences." Cale stepped forward, unarmed yet unafraid. The energy of the spark radiated from him, a quiet defiance that seemed to shake the air itself. "We're not surrendering," Cale said, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the crowd. "You fear the spark because you don't understand it. But it's not something to be contained. It's a part of all of us. And it's time the galaxy remembered what that means." For a moment, there was only silence. The council troops hesitated, their weapons faltering as the energy around Cale grew stronger. And then, one by one, they lowered their arms. The official's expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing their face. "You don't know what you're playing with," they said, their voice trembling. "I do," Cale replied. "And so will everyone else." As the light of the spark pulsed brighter, Cale knew their journey was far from over. But for the first time, he felt hope, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. They had been given a gift, a reminder of what it meant to fight, to endure, to believe. And together they would ensure that the spark burned brighter than ever.